Hi, this is Andrea, and I am here to talk to you about Chapter 20 for HIT 421. Are you excited? You are on the home stretch. Just a couple more weeks left, just a couple of more items left to do, and just this one more chapter with a video. So let's get started. It's on workplace law. And if you're wondering, why in the world are we talking about workplace law? Because if you ever get into leadership, you will need to know about it. And really, it's a good basic thing to know for yourself as an individual, particularly as you will eventually be interviewed at some point. Or may even find yourself doing interviewing. As well as it's just a good idea to know what are the rules. So starting on page 489 of your book, it goes through the beginning of workplace law. It talks about discrimination and age-related laws. People cannot be discriminated on or should not ever be discriminated on. Age, disability, equal pay, compensation based on gender, genetic information, definitely never ever harassed in any way, shape, or form. Natural origin, and that could be race, color, it could be again genetic, it could be where you were born. None of that has anything to do with how you do your job and the person that you are. It may have to do with some of your customs or some of the ways that you do things, but it should not have anything to do with whether or not you're employed, and if you're employed, how you are treated. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, no matter what. We're all human, and we all deserve that. And we need to do it for others as well as for ourselves. Pregnancy, whether or not someone is pregnant, whether or not they have children, whether or not they are planning to have children, all of that, none of that has anything to do with employment, and it can't be brought into the conversation by someone who is in a position of interviewing or authority. Again, retaliation, very, very bad, and thankfully there are laws related to that. Sexual harassment, harassment of any kind is just absolutely should not ever be tolerated. It should not happen. It is just despicable. And thankfully there are laws related to that as well. And although unfortunately, as we've seen in the last few years, those have been flouted by some high public figures, and how disappointing that is. It really shows such a lack of integrity. So that goes through that. It talks about the Equal Employment Opportunity Act of 1972, the EEOA. It talks about civil rights related acts. Again, skin color has nothing to do with who gets employed. It should never. Let's put it this way. It should never have anything to do with who gets employed and how they're treated on the job. That has no place whatsoever. And as you'll see in figure 20.1 on page 491, aspects of employment affected by discrimination laws, hiring and firing. That should have nothing to do with any of those things listed on page 490. Compensation, assignment, classification of employees. Again, that has nothing to do with age, disability, genetic information, natural origin, pregnancy status, race, color, religion, any of that. Should have nothing to do with it. Job advertisements, recruitment, testing, use of company facilities, training and apprenticeship programs, fringe benefits, pay, retirement plans and disability leaves, other terms and conditions of employment, discriminated. Again, there should never be any discrimination or harassment or retaliation that has anything to do with these. Now, unfortunately, that's the ideal, and that's what the laws state. But you and I both know that unfortunately in this world there are people who do not follow the laws or believe that they're above the laws, or are just plain not nice people, and they do hideous, evil things. So to be honest, we have to be aware of these things to protect ourselves and to protect others, and also to encourage that if we do run into such an awful situation, that we do speak up, that we find that there are channels that we can report these things. That there are ways that we can move above and beyond this and not let this happen again to ourselves or to others. So Moving on to page 492, it talks about disability discrimination, equal pay, genetics, national origin. It goes through all of those. Some things that there are, it gives an example of some auxiliary aids for people who have hearing or sight disabilities and some things that can be done with that. You'll learn more about disabilities as you go through, and we can talk about that at some point, if you're a first year student in some of your second year classes, about ways that we can accommodate those who have disabilities. And if you personally have a disability now, you can think of the ways that the school and ICC is trying to accommodate you. And I, as a teacher and an instructor, I definitely want to accommodate you. I want to see you succeed just the same as everyone else. Whether you have a disability or not, it's none of my business, and it's really none of anyone else's business. We want you to succeed. And that's the same whether you're talking race, religion, natural origin, age, any of those things, gender. We want you to succeed. And we certainly don't want to be using those in any way, shape, or form to decide anything that would be a part of that. So it goes on to talk about labor laws on page 494, about how wages and overtime are determined. It has a good definition of exempt employees versus non-exempt employees. If you're an exempt employee, basically you're salaried. And if you're salaried, you work probably more than 40 hours a week in most jobs, and you get paid regardless. If you're a non-exempt employee, it means you're hourly. It means that we have to be careful about your pay, that you have to clock in and out. There has to be some kind of measurement that if you work more than your established hours, that there's appropriate payment for that, like overtime and those types of things. So that's one thing you'll just need to be aware of. Compensation and benefits talks about those. And then there's a small section on unions and the National Labor Relations Board that you can look at on pages 495, 496. There's a interesting table on page 497 about worker rights and unfair labor practices. That it's good to know, whether you're in a union environment or not, it's good to know your rights as a worker. Because there has been both good and bad with and without unions. And that's something that you as a person, as an individual, needs to make a personal judgment call about, based on your situation, based on the union, based on your workplace. Some places work really well without unions. Other places work really well with unions. It really is unique to each organization. You can't necessarily say that an entire field needs to be unionized, because there are so many differences. So just be careful with stereotypes or with applying something broadly, because it really is individualistic, and it really looks at the situation and the environment and what have you. Then it talks about downsizing and layoffs. And unfortunately, in this time right now with COVID, a lot of people who haven't been in the position of being unemployed or being downsized during layoffs may have found themselves in that way. So not a bad idea to familiarize yourself with that, and particularly with Iowa, looking at what are Iowa laws and rules. One thing you do need to know is about OSHA, and that's at the bottom of page 498, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. These individuals can come into any place at any time and do an audit and a survey to make sure that it is safe for workers. And that is a good thing. Please understand me, that is a good thing. OSHA often finds violations. They hold employers accountable. They insist upon education and protection materials and things like that. I'm sure OSHA is crazy busy right now with COVID. But this is all good. They fine companies, sometimes quite large sums of money. And where you hear OSHA most often referred to in healthcare has to do with eating and drinking at your workplace and that being in a patient care area. So you may have run into that hospitals, physician offices, clinics, those types of places can be fined by OSHA if they come in and they see that employees are eating and drinking in a space that is also used or nearby or within an area where a patient could cough, sneeze, where specimens are, those types of things. So it's really important to know OSHA rules and to make sure that they're followed. So it talks about OSHA's responsibilities over on page 499, and then goes into employer responsibility and employer rights. Always good to know. OSHA inspections, how those work, and their inspection priorities. If there's been a dangerous accident or a loss of life somewhere, that has to be reported, and typically OSHA will go in and they will take a look and survey, audit, try and get to the bottom of what has happened. And you may have heard of that. Sometimes when there's explosions at a factory or a plant, something like that, OSHA comes in immediately afterwards and they're investigating to understand how could this have happened and what do we do to prevent it from ever happening again, and was the organization responsible? Was this just some kind of freak accident that no one could have anticipated? All those types of things. Well, that ends Chapter 20, Workplace Law, and that ends the book, because then after that is the glossary. I want to thank you for being in the legal affairs class, and encourage you to shoot me an email if you have ideas on ways that we can make this better. Specifically, if you found the videos to be helpful more than the PowerPoints, less than the PowerPoints, along with the PowerPoints, because I'll be looking to revise this class for spring of 2021. And I want to make sure that how I revise it is definitely better and improved and student-friendly, those types of things. So thank you for the opportunity to be your instructor, and I thank you in advance for any feedback you can give me on improvements or things that you did like, things that you found helpful, things that you think students in the future would enjoy. Take care, stay safe. I hope your family, your loved ones, friends, all remain safe through this epidemic, pandemic, and quarantine. And we all look forward to eventually socializing at some point in person in the future. Take care. Bye.